in India, we are not encouraged to think big, just culturally, right? Like the whole Indian ethos and the cultural ethos that we have is that, be humble and, like take everyone along.
So, welcome to the third episode of Hashtag Career Goals. How are you doing?
Hi, Nitya. It's good to be here and lovely to meet you.
I'm very excited to jump right in and talk about your career, about your journey, about your learnings, mistakes, and pretty much everything else in between as well. And I do want to start from the very beginning, right? Like from your very first role in sales. And, when we think of sales, I think the first thing we think of is a person who's super outgoing, really extroverted, loves talking, loves meeting people. And from what I've kind of heard about you on the internet, what I've read, is that that's not something that you found yourself fitting that particular mold, right? So when this role, this opportunity came to you, what really made you say yes? Like how and why did you say yes to this role?
Yeah, so there's a background story to this. I'd actually done my summers with City in the markets team, and that's where I converted my PPO. So my natural posting was to be in the markets team itself, which was based out of Mumbai. And for certain personal reasons, I wanted to be in Gurgaon or Delhi actually back then. And so I went back to City and I said, I have certain personal situations that have evolved, since that. Would you be kind enough to consider, giving me Delhi as my base location? And they said, you know what, we could make your request come through, but it will not be in markets which, as you were describing, I thought was a perfect fit for me. I'd always seen myself as someone who was very good with numbers. I had kind of seen myself do a role which would be behind a laptop, behind Excel sheets, and doing a lot of simulation. So they said, but that's not a role that we can give you. They said, the only role that we have available is a business development role. So you have the choice. Take a role which is what your strengths are, where you've also proven to us, because I've done my internship there, and that was going to be in Mumbai, and the personal location preference of Delhi made me kind of evaluate a business development role, which I historically had never thought I would ever find myself to be a fit, because I was an inherently shy person, and I was not very comfortable talking to strangers. And so yeah, so there was the trade-off that I had to make. And because at that point of time my preference to be in Delhi was higher, I kind of said that, okay, I'll take what you have. And that was the only thinking that I did, to be honest. And I think the other lens that I played out was that, listen, this is my first job.
Mhm.
I anyways have to start from scratch, so I should at this stage be open to any kind of learning that's coming in.
Yeah.
And perhaps something that I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about, maybe it's something to try out at the beginning of your career. So why not give it a try, kind of a thing. So I think I said yes because I wanted to prioritize something on the personal side, and then second, because I was like, I'm anyway starting out fresh. What do I have to lose?
Yeah.
I'll only learn. So that was really what kind of got me there. And you will notice this theme coming back in
Mhm.
later parts of my career moves as well.
Excited to delve into that as well. But it almost feels as though the first job just pretty much just came your way, right? Like it just happened to you and you kept like working towards it. Was there any point where you either questioned um your capability at any point, or that you were confident about your capability at any point?
No, so I was very, very underconfident about the first role that I did, sales. And I'll tell you a little bit about, like I said, this is a common theme that you'll see in a few of my other career moves as well. And also what happened is that it was a sales quota bearing role. In the first almost, I think, 9 months, I did not have even one closure. Because there were many good leads that I would prospect, but we were trying to do business development for giving out loans and credit to these SMBs, and credit assessment, risk assessment, and getting it through the whole approval process that City had, and which was a very, very strong process, was not very easy. So despite all your effort and hard work that you were doing, I was on an average, I think, meeting more than five uh, SME companies in a week. There were weeks that I would meeting 10. So I was really working very, very hard, and I was learning a lot. I was like a sponge,
Yeah.
but I was not closing any targets. I was not getting anywhere close to my target. So there was this period of time when I was like, oh my God, am I even meant to be here? Was it a wrong choice? Like did I like make a mistake? But I think in sales, what tends to happen is if you kind of just put your head down and keep doing what is the right thing, keep doing what is right for the customer, and keep preparing and uh, bettering yourself in your solutioning, whether it's externally or in this case, it was less external, it was more internal. Like, how do I understand risk much better? How do I make sure that the proposal that I'm putting up for approval passes the muster of the credit framework or the risk framework that Citi had? So it was really a lot of learning on that. So, as long as you're doing you're kind of getting your input trigger right, as I call it, the outputs happen eventually. So yeah, and the kick of the first conversion was very, very high. I can still remember that, sitting in that, in that company, and, like actually giving that demand draft of, I don't even remember if it was, I don't know what that amount was, maybe $10 million equivalent INR. And, like, I remember giving that demand draft to that company, and it was a high, right? And I think after that, there was no looking back.
Yeah.
I think that's really what introduced me to the high of being in sales. That while the going can be tough and can be frustrating sometimes when the conversions are not happening, but when you do have a win, it just gives you that energy, gives you that confidence, gives you that validation that you can do this, and it just is a great confidence booster, if I can call it that. Also, what tends to happen is when your clients kind of respond back with the value that you've been able to deliver to them, right? When you see that tangible impact on a customer's business, and you see the founder of that company or the CEO of that company kind of acknowledge the impact that you've been able to make, that's very satisfying.
Right. So you're talking more in terms of in the sales space, but would you say the same for any other job, right? If there's a fresher or if a mid 20s, person who's trying out a new role and it's really not working out for them in the first
Yeah.
couple of months, would you just say like keep your head down and like keep working at it, and then you'll probably crack it at some point?
Yeah.
And is there a point where you decide, hey, this role might not be for me? Like, is there a
Yeah.
time that you need to decide that?
So two things, one, I think, yes, I think, always focus on what you can control. What you can't control is something that you don't want to worry too much about, right? So with whatever role you're in, whether it's sales, whether it's any kind of role that you're in, right? Just focus on, have you given your 100% to what is in your control, or is there something more that you can do? I think that's one lens. I think the second lens is any company that you're in, right? You will have a lot of supporters. Are you kind of open to seek help? Are you open to receiving help, and kind of do what is expected of you, but also not hesitate to reach out and say that I don't know this, but I think you're someone who's been doing a great job of it, can you help me? I think just finding those pockets of help, and then kind of blending that and complementing that with your effort, I think that just usually makes it work and makes it turn around. I think patience anyways is needed, whether you're at an early stage or at a late stage. Oftentimes, like now in my career, oftentimes the strategies that I'm building out are usually more medium term, right? They may not give immediate results, so like, how do you stay focused, and how do you lead your teams to stay focused, even though the results may not be evident just yet,
Instantly,
right?
yeah.
So I think that's very important. And I've, along my career, right, I found that just expanding your horizon by talking to very different people who may be in the domain or who may not be in the domain, just taking that opportunity to talk to many more people will give you ideas that can solve it. Having said which, much like stock market investments, there should also be a point of time when you say, I need to stop my losses,
Yeah.
right? So do also know what that stop loss position is for you. And that, to be honest, is a very personal call, right? Which is the second part of your question. If you're putting in your effort, you're doing all of this, but it's not giving you that satisfaction, or if it's not making you feel happy, or, if you feel that, instead of giving you energy, it's, kind of drawing out energy from you, then I also recommend to kind of cut your losses and look for something where you will do better, because I also always advise a lot of people I work with, otherwise, I play on your strengths, don't play on your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Right? Like, all of us can always all of us have a balance of strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
I come from the school of thought where harnessing your strengths and making them higher and higher and higher is a better success strategy than to kind of just beating yourself out and trying to change something and improve. And then, so never play on improving your weaknesses. Always play on harnessing your strengths and bringing up your weaknesses to a level where they will where you can sustain them, so to speak of.
Yeah, completely agree with you on that. And but here what I'm seeing is that you tried something completely new, and that was a very early part of your career, right? Um, would you say that it's easier to do it just because it was your first role and it's easy to try things? What if, what if you're a person in your middle career, and you want to change career paths? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it doable?
It's very much doable, and if there's anyone who's a living example of that, I think it's my career. So 14 years into having built a successful corporate banking career in Citi, I call this my midlife crisis. I had a midlife crisis point where I was like, okay, I'm good at what I'm doing. I'm making an impact. I can do this for the rest of my life. I had great teams working with me. I had great leaders. So all in all, I had great client relationships. I was in a space that I really loved. I was excited to go to work every day morning, even having been in that space for 14 years. But there was this niggling thought that was coming in my mind again and again that am I growing? Am I learning? Am I feeling stretched? Am I challenging myself enough? And I kind of felt that no, I had gotten into a comfort zone, and I could deliver 200% with 50% of the effort. So somewhere I was kind of feeling that I wasn't stretching myself enough. That was one thing. Second thing that was also happening is this was a time when in banking fintech was just Chinese fintech, particularly Alipay in specific and WeChat Pay at that point of time. They were really doing some cutting edge stuff, which being in the financial services sector, I was observing and keeping a track of, and I was very excited with what was happening there. And I felt my personal call on that. Not that I had a crystal ball and I was like looking ahead in the future, but to me it was very evident that what was happening in China in fintech back then, and what was happening on the consumer banking side or consumer financial services side, it was matter of time before it would come to the enterprise side of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt a very strong desire to one, shake myself out of my comfort zone, put myself completely out of the zone where I knew how to operate. But also I had this keen desire to learn this new evolving trend, which I felt back then would come to be a force to reckon with. So this was 14 years into my career with Citibank. I kind of had not envisaged it or thought about this before. I had thought I'll be a career banker. I had thought that City, I still call City my first love. I kind of thought that I will continue to be there. But then these two pulls became so strong in me that when I had the opportunity, to kind of join Paytm as its first chief operating officer for the Paytm Payments Bank, it just was something that I was compelled to say yes to, even though it was something that I'd never done. And understand that corporate banking and consumer banking are very different. Certain terminologies might be common, but the way they operate is very, very different. Also, the scale of a payments bank was envisaged to be very different. I'd worked in a foreign bank.
That you were pretty much seeking discomfort, right? Like you recognize that you were in a very comfortable space and then you said, no, like I need to make a change. So I wonder, is this something that kind of comes naturally to you? Is this how you were even when you were younger? Or is this something that you've kind of nurtured in yourself?
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting question that you asked, right? I actually grew up in a very safe childhood with no changes whatsoever. In fact, if anything, my dad used to be in a transferable job. Every 3 to 4 years, he would be up and about. And, me, my mom, and my younger brother, we stayed put in one house, one school for years, right? So with no disruption whatsoever. My mom was working as well, so as I was growing up, I think till the time I went for my MBA, which was the first time I stepped foot out of my house, I was in a very, very stable life. I think the other thing that happened for me is I also grew up a lot in city. when I joined City as a management associate, the culture that I saw there, which kind of taught me the professional ethos, which I imbibed and has actually held me in good stead over the years. And then now, working for Google and Paytm and Clicks, from every organization, I've absorbed different professional ethos. I think with City, the first 14 years, which was the formative years of my career, I think I saw City really encourage and reward people to diversify their experiences. Right, so it was encouraged to kind of look for a role change every 3 to 4 years. So I think it was just growing up in that environment, and kind of I guess at the early start of your career, you're also very impressionable, right? So what you see around happen, kind of sets the foundation of what you think is the thing to do or the right thing to do. So I think it's a combination of those two.
Right.
But I'm guessing generally also in life, I am somebody who gets excited with new things. I am somebody who likes, who's unafraid of the unknown. I actually like unknown. So I think those are a little bit of maybe intrinsic DNA traits plus, the conditioning that has happened over the years.
Right, right. It's so interesting that you say that you're okay with uncertainty, because for me, just personally, I almost get pretty hassled with just uncertain situations. I prefer to know, okay, this is going to happen and this is next. So for a person like me, right, who wants to seek discomfort, but I feel pretty challenged by it. Is there any advice that you could give to me so I can become a little more like you?
So, one, I think you should, like I said, you should play on what your strengths are. You don't have to do what works, the formula that works for me or, for anyone else. I think the other thing, much like how you were describing it, right? I am somebody who likes to be in control. Right. I mean, I don't think I have OCD, but I think I do like to have, things in order and things in control. I like to know. So I think while I embrace uncertainty and I cherish and I thrive on it, but, in every time that I've taken such moves, professionally or personally as well, I always like to have a plan. And that plan would be planned to step 1 to step 2 to step 3. So it is fairly detailed in that sense. So I do prepare myself well. I do invest a lot of time in doing my homework, in preparing and making sure that we are sticking to the plan. So I do like to be in control. So it's a blend of the two. So if you have that strength, I think it'll help you.
Okay, great. Here I see a connect. So I'm glad to know that you're pretty similar in that way. Yeah, going back a little bit. So you said, that you had this stable childhood, but then you were also given this opportunity to move to Singapore, right? Or that you commuted between
Yes.
Delhi and Singapore. So, I mean, to me, that seems like this huge life-changing decision that you need to make, and you have this young child at home as well. How does one go about making a big decision like this? What
Yeah.
what were things that were playing on your mind?
Yeah, so I did a lot of market research. Oftentimes, when I'm trying to make these pivotal decisions, I do like to. For me, career moves, like, changing industries is not as pivotal, to be honest. I don't think I've done so much of a market research then, because, I feel the stakes are relatively lower there, because I feel that what's the worst case that can happen? Right? Like either I learn and I'll thrive, or I won't, and then I'll figure out my way out, right? So that's usually my approach when I look at career moves, to be honest, right? So I'm a little easy there. But when it comes to things as pivotal as that, as a location change, and like family being here, and it's not just a decision that will impact me, it'll impact my husband, his career, my children. We stay very close to our families, so like it has a big implication. So there actually, to be honest, I spoke to a lot of people who were maintaining a similar household, where one of the partners was working elsewhere and one partner was holding fort at home. And I spoke to a lot of them, trying to understand that how is it that they were making it work? How is it that their children were getting impacted? How is it that they were dealing, or their families were dealing, with regards family commitments and stuff like that. So just talking to a lot of people and understanding how is it that they were making it work, whether they thought it was worth it, what is it that they were gaining out of it. I think that kind of gave me a little bit of confidence that I think it's doable. One of the things that actually I was told in my extensive market research, and it's really funny, like at that point of time when I was trying to make that decision, anyone I would find, I would ask this question. Like, so sometimes I was on a flight sitting next to strangers, And if I would figure out that that stranger was actually doing something similar, I'd be, ready with my questions. So I've asked these questions to strangers on flights, and I've asked this to people I knew, or friends and friends and friends, who I've kind of figured out. So I've been unafraid to reach out to strangers and get more insights into this. One of the things that I did realize when I was doing a lot of market research is, at that point of time, I don't think I came across any woman who was doing that. I came across a lot of men who were doing this,
Right.
where the women were holding fort at home with children, and the men were doing this, cross city, cross country kind of a thing. And that was something that, to me, the feminist in me kind of also said that, why should that be the case? And thankfully I do have a very supportive partner, and he has similar mindsets and thought process as me, and he was of the same opinion as well. Yeah, why not? I mean, if you're excited about it, if you want to do it, of course I'll hold fort. Of course, it's another matter that he's into consulting, so he does travel 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So it did require him to make a few changes as well. He continued to travel, but as I actually firmly believe, and I advocate for this a lot, that frankly, if there's any place any woman can afford to take such bets, any actually woman and man, but men do it more often, and therefore I'm emphasizing a lot more on women. I think the place that this can be done is India. Because the amount of family support that we all can ask for or receive without asking for, the amount of domestic help that we can afford, if also the general bonds and relationships with friends and family are so strong that you can actually very easily ask for help, even with your extended family and friends, right? So I actually firmly believe that if there's any place that anybody can do this, and particularly a woman, it's India. So frankly, if you're not doing this, you're perhaps not doing this because you don't want to do this, not because the enablement and help is not available. And I'm also mindful that when I say this may not be the reality or situation for every person, but I'm just saying this from a societal setup, that India does have a societal setup that can enable this to happen. Of course, you can't, as is the case with any relationship, you will also have to invest in those relationships to be able to be comfortable and ask for those helps. So it's a give and take. So yes, so yeah, so I think those are a long-winded answer, but I touched upon quite a few points that I think are relevant.
Of course. And I mean, I love the point of you with your being so dedicated to your market research that you would go to the extent of asking just about anyone and everyone about it. So I think that's really cool of you. Do you think this is the kind of ideology that you follow for any decision that you make? Because I wonder, as a leader, I'm sure you have plenty of decisions that you have to make every day, every week. So is market research like your key driving factor, where you're like, let me research as much info about a particular situation as you can, and then make the most informed decision possible?
My decision-making process is very heavy on data and analytics, but not so much market research. I've done this kind of market research only twice in my life. One was this, which I just described to you, because it was a big move for us as a family, not just for me. Frankly, if I was not a mother and I didn't have to think about 2 kids and about the family, this thing, I perhaps wouldn't even have invested in so much. Like I said, my personal approach is, let's go with the flow. If I'm getting excited with stuff, I will. I usually approach it with that level of confidence that, we'll find a way out. And if the way is not found out and you fail, so what? I'm not afraid of failure, right? So I'm like, I can always build back, or you can always build back, right? You can. So like I was saying, my decision making is very, very data led and very analytical, right? So my starting point of a decision is, it's almost like in my head. I don't do it on a physical Excel file, but in my own head, I have this Excel file that I will draw up. I'll list out all the points which are, in the positive or in the negative, or all data points that I have to analyze, and then I will kind of synthesize all of that, connect the dots, and then make a decision. And then after I've made an analytical decision and which is, when I make my decision with the mind, then I will corroborate that with my heart as well. That is this sounding right? Is this something that I think I will be able to deal with, the emotional angle of it? But yeah, my first approach is more analytical, followed by this thing. I try and think about any decision that I do from at least 4 to 5 perspectives before I actually finally arrive at a decision. Like even at work, when I'm looking at something, if it's a business strategy that I have to build out, let's say building the next 3-year strategy. So I'll typically look at macroeconomic, I'll look at industry, I'll look at, growth trends and stuff like that. So that will be my one perspective of analysis. Then I'll blend it with, let's say, the internal team composition, like what are the skill sets that we have, what are the skill gaps that we have, how does one build, can I fill in those gaps, etc. So that will be the internal organizational preparedness and readiness and what will needed, what will be needed to be done. Then typically the third layer will be about, how will this fit in with other cross-functional teams and programs or the overall strategy of the company. The fourth lens will be that, okay, if let's say let's build out some scenarios. If this is the scenario that happens, that how will we execute? What are the worst case scenario? What are the best case scenario that we land up in? So it's usually my decision making. It may not always follow the sequence, but that's how my mind is now trained to evaluate, perspectives which are multidimensional before really coming to a decision point. And now over time, when you've owned it out for so long, it usually happens,
almost
like
naturally, right?
Yeah, you kind of build that muscle to be able to kind of assimilate a lot of this information and kind of process it.
So let's go back a little bit. Again, like when you were growing up as a teenager, what were your thoughts about leadership? Like, did you think that you'd ever want to be a leader?
No, I think I was when I was not just when I was I was growing up. I think even when in my early stage of my career, I don't think I was ambitious enough. I would always have a goalpost which would be 2 levels from where I was, right? But my horizon was very narrow. Like whenever I aspired, like when I was a teenager, I would be like, okay, I need to do my economics honors, that I want to do an MBA because I want to join the corporate world, because you succeed well or you do well in corporate world. Landing to the corporate world was my goalpost. Once I got into the goalpost or into the corporate world, then my goalpost was like, okay, I'm at this level, then I need to plan for my 2 levels beyond, like my promotion role. I want to, if I'm an individual contributor, I want to become a manager. If I'm this level, then I want to become this level. So my ambitions were always very limited to the next 2 to 3 roles or levels. I did not have the wide vision, to kind of think bold and think big. And this was actually one very interesting conversation that I had with one of my colleagues and friend many years ago. And it was a very innocuous comment that she made to me, but it has stuck with me ever since, right? Like, I was discussing with her that I'm contemplating, this was also the time when I was thinking of moving overseas. And, there were some very interesting roles that were being offered to me to be in India. And I had this one, which was in Singapore. And I was like, just kind of having a chat with her and telling her that, I have this role offered in India and this one here. This is how I'm thinking about it, etc. And, she just turned around and she said that, and I was telling her that, I think this role will get me to my next level, etc., etc. And, she just turned around saying that, why wouldn't someone like you think about aspiring to be a CEO? Because I think you have it in you to be a CEO. And I was like, no, I never thought about that. What are you talking about, right? And that was the end of that conversation, right? We moved on to other things. As usual chats with friends happen to be, right? You move from one topic to another. But then, I actually reflected back on that statement, and it's ever since that whenever I catch myself thinking small or aspiring for something smaller, I hold myself accountable to not do that. And I challenge myself and I ask myself that, am I thinking big enough? Am I thinking bold enough? Am I thinking ambitious enough? Whether it's for my business, whether it's for my team, or whether it's for myself, whether it's my professional goals, whether it's my personal goals, everything. I just basically that one innocuous comment just opened up my thinking to, always pushing myself to think larger than I by default do.
That's amazing that you were able to have that conversation at that point in your life, right? Because I mean, I feel like I do resonate quite a bit with you here, where even for me, I think of, okay, the next 3 years of my life, this is what it should look like. And here's my plan to get there. So it's interesting how we can just like you said, like broaden your mindset or like broaden your vision and you can make things happen. So that's interesting to hear.
In fact, this one I'll also actually quote Vijay Shekhar Sharma, right? I think that's something that I admire about him is, he always, I mean, he has a statement which is now actually borrowed by lots of people. He says, go big or go home,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is splattered all over the office.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when he just got even his in principle license to be, setting up the payments bank, his first vision was that I want to be banking 500 million Indians, right? At that point of time, we were 1.3, billion people. And he said, I want to bank almost 40-45% of that. Or I remember when years ago he also kind of said that I want to be the first $100 million market cap company. Of course the reality right now is different, but at least he had the vision. So I think also my like I said, in every stint that I've had, and there's so much to learn from, and there's so much to change and evolve as a person, and I've evolved as a person with all these years, and I continue to grow. I think also working with Indian entrepreneurs, particularly in my case, when I did work with these two, I think just also allowed me to realize that in India we are not encouraged to think big, just culturally, right? Like the whole Indian ethos and the cultural ethos that we have is that be humble, and like take everyone along, right? It's just that, which is good. You don't want to compromise on that. Those are all great things about our culture. But I think one thing that we can definitely learn from the Chinese, or even some of the other developed market companies, is to think really big and think global. So I think that's so a little bit of that one innocuous comment, but also then being in environments
Mm-hmm.
where thinking bold became second nature, is something that comes very helpful now.
Yeah. To me, what it seems like is thinking big, thinking bold is one of the main characteristics I think you would see in a successful leader.
Yeah.
Are there any other traits that you kind of usually are on the lookout for in your team as well, right? Like when you're trying to see, or when you're trying to nurture further, I mean, future leaders. It's like, how do you go about spotting these leaders in your team? This particular skills that you look for, qualities that you look for.
Yeah. So I actually believe that, in that whole equation of skill and will, I think skill can be taught. Most roles, are not very complicated. They're not like, it's not like a nuclear physics R&D role, or or like a aeronautical R&D role that we have, right? Most companies, I think skill can be taught. What I look for typically is the will and the attitude.
Mm-hmm.
uh, right? I think attitude and will is something that is difficult to. I mean, yes, we all evolve and grow, but I think there has to be some ingredients of that already in a person. So I think that's something that I look for when I'm looking for people in my team. But in terms of leaders, I think quick decision making, or just being able to take decisions and not just procrastinate decision making. I think decision making and risk taking
Mm-hmm.
are two critical skills for a leader, right? Because if as a leader you're not comfortable with taking risks, or are not comfortable with failure,
Mm-hmm.
then you will make for a very bad leader, right? You have to be very, very willing to sponsor risks. You have to be very, very willing to take failure in your stride.
Mm-hmm.
And the traits of a good leader always are that you are, the credit of something that's gone well is your team's. The burden or the blame, or the responsibility of something not going well is yours. So you have to have uh, that courage, to be able to do that. So so those are some of the critical skills that a
Mm-hmm.
leader needs to have. Of course, vision is another critical one, right? Because
Right.
you are somebody who is expected to be able to cut through what is the obvious, and look for patterns which are not very apparent, and look ahead so that you can build a vision which the team can then organize their efforts around. But so yeah, so I think there's a little bit of that vision, risk taking, decision making abilities, I think. And the fourth, which is a very, very critical one, is are you a leader who's a people leader? And when I say people leader, because as a leader, your team will take you forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're the one who's going to perhaps be the captain of the ship, but the ones who are really steering the ship forward is going to be the team. So are you a leader who's going to empower and enable your team to bring their best, and make it an environment that they want to bring their best?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for a leader, that becomes the difference between being successful or not being successful.
Mm-hmm. What was it like for you when you were first given a leadership position? I'm sure you moved from individual contributor to a manager to a leader, and that's such a huge change, right?
Yeah.
How did you embrace it?
Yeah. So I think my first I actually became a manager to a team which was more seasoned and more mature than me. Many of them were. So I think for me, one thing that I did right was to actually acknowledge that and respect the experience and the depth of experience that everyone brought to that table. So give that respect and acknowledgement. I think working with them as people who are bringing the value to the table that they truly deserve in that sense, so giving them that respect. The mistake that I did was, I think, I tried to be a super IC, right? Super individual contributor, right? Like if you're used to, there's a formula that's got you successful, that's got you there, right? So you end up wanting to do everything yourself, wanting to do it with your quality and with your trademark approach, right? So I think that was a mistake that I did. Thankfully I learned very quickly. um, and I think I also had some very good sponsors and mentors at that point of time, who I could go back and share or ask some of these questions. So I think I got some good guidance at that point of time, so I was able to kind of correct that. But yeah, that's one big change management that every individual has to go through when you're moving from being an IC to a manager. That how do you stop expecting your level of quality in the work that everyone in your team is bringing in? How do you kind of build? How do you trust your team to do what they know well?
Yeah, right. That's so interesting. I mean, again, I find myself resonating with you quite a bit. So I'm gonna keep pointing that out. I think even in my first role, when I was working with a team of 4, and that's the first time that I was given the chance to manage a team. It was so interesting that I would keep looking for traits, or I would want their work to be very similar to how I would do it. But then I think over time I realized that everyone has their strengths and styles of doing it, and that I should just help them hone it instead of trying to make it like I was doing it, right? So I think
Yeah,
that's very interesting. Something that I also really like talking about on this podcast is about mentorship and networking. So let me ask you about networking actually. Let's imagine you're a 25-year-old, 25, 26-year-old, and you want to start keeping in touch with your older colleagues or your bosses, right, from your previous organizations. Like what would be your, I guess, actionable advice
yeah,
to keeping in touch?
yeah. So there are some very obvious ones, right? Like obviously there are moments in the year. There's New Year, there's Diwali, there's birthdays, there's all of those things, right? I think those are some things, those are easy ones to do, but then those can also become very mechanical for both sides, right? So it may not really do well to build a deep relationship. So I think a few tips and ideas over there could be that, for example, if there's an article that you're reading, which let's say reminds you of an individual, sending it across to them, saying that, I came across this article. It reminded me of that conversation that we had that day, and I thought it'll be of interest to you. So here's, the article. Why don't you go through it? Kind of, or for example, networking, by the way, is also a lot about helping others. Networking, and I say this quite often, right? Networking is less about you leveraging the network for your advantage, but it's really a lot about you first start off by giving in, by helping people. So sometimes building connections or introducing people, like let's say somebody you're talking to today, and they say, oh, I'm looking for someone to talk to, for this research that I have to do. And then you're like, oh, this previous manager of mine was a great person, had some great insights. I think you'll benefit from having a chat with them, making that connection, saying that, listen, would you mind chatting up with this person for over coffee? This person is doing some interesting research. I think it's an area of expertise for you. So, just also sometimes helping others connect, make sure that you are deepening your network as well.
Yeah.
Or, for example, if you have opportunities to co-collaborate with them, could be for anything that you're doing related to work, or otherwise just thinking of them and, just kind of tapping on them. So those are some other low touch but meaningful ways to stay in touch. Otherwise, the high touch ways are, of course, making sure that you're meeting up with them. Like, if they're different cities, if you're visiting that city, give them a call, catch up for coffee, or vice versa, or plan these meetups, etc. But those are not, as you keep increasing your network over the years, it may not be that practical to do that with everyone, right? So yeah, so you will have to balance it out between low touch and high touch. And yeah, I mean, again, I'm sure what will happen over the years is also you'll try and figure out which are the ones that you want to have higher touch engagement, which are the ones with medium touch is fine, which are the ones, which low touch is also fine. It could be either based on the common areas that you found of interest that could determine the prioritization, or it could be the if you're expecting to leverage that relationship on an ongoing basis, so you could do prioritization based on that. So I mean, based on that, then you can also decide the frequency at which you would definitely want to be in touch. So there is a little bit of it's more art, and it's more, let it be more organic, because it's really about human relationships. But being a little intentional about it and putting in a little bit of science, make sure that you don't drop connect with someone you ideally would not have wanted to drop connect with.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for this. It's so unique, and I think refreshing to get an actionable advice to networking, because a lot of times we hear that you should give a lot in, while you're networking with people, but here you've clearly defined, like, just like prioritize your connections, see how you can kind of collaborate with them, see how you can keep in touch with them. So I think that's going to be very helpful for the people listening to this episode. I am excited because now we're at the end of this episode, and it's our last section. And I'm just going to throw a couple of questions at you, and you can just answer, with just one sentence.
Okay.
Right. So yeah. So tell me a little bit about what life is like at Google, especially if you can touch on points that we usually don't hear that much about.
Okay, so see, Google is a company with very, very talented people, right?
Yeah.
What that does is it makes us as a culture very performance oriented, right? And when I say performance oriented, it's about the passion with which we want to make an impact on clients on a day-to-day basis. The desire to do that is very, very high. So that itself makes it a place where the performance bar just keeps going higher and higher and higher, but not because it's a top down expectation, but just because you have such talented people and they want to do their best every day consistently, so the bar just keeps getting raised higher and higher.
Yeah. What's a common mistake that you think a lot of professionals in their 20s tend to make, and do you have any advice for them?
I think people tend to jump to conclusions of what they like or what they would like or not like too soon. I think early in the career, you should be open to, you should be a lot more open, is what I would say. I think I see a lot of youngsters already coming up, with a point of view that, oh, I think I like this role, or I think I won't like this role, or I think I've done this for 1 year and I want to now move on. So I think, that impatience, if I can call it that, also is something that doesn't go very well, because oftentimes when you're switching roles very often, it doesn't help you build some expertise, and that doesn't come to impact at the initial years of your career, but it will come to have an impact as you're looking to go from individual contributor to the next level. I think spend enough time to build some expertise and be open to new experiences without having a preconceived point of view on it.
Do you think that there is something as that you'd call a dream role, or do you think that you can make the best out of what you have at your current role?
Both. I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think it depends on individuals. It depends on at what stage of your life you are at. Frankly, I also feel that the way the world changes every 5 years nowadays, the dreams change as well, right? So I think you should allow yourself to have that flexibility in your dreams. It could be possible that you're at a stage of your career where you just love what you're doing and it is your dream role and you want to stay invested in it. By all means, do that. It could also be that you don't know where you want to get to and you just want to kind of try your hand at different things and experiment with a lot of things. Be open to that as well. So I think the variety of roles and opportunities that exist today, and the dynamism with which they will keep changing or evolving will continue to exist. So I think just grab it with both hands and just be more flexible with it, I think, and more open-minded with it will hopefully create more fulfilling career journeys.
Yeah. Awesome, great. So that was about it from my end. We've run out of my questions, but I'm so glad that we could chat. And there's so much that I've learned from you, and I'm really excited for all our listeners to learn from you as well. So yeah, I just want to thank you for your time. And this was so great. It was so insightful.
Thank you for your questions, Nitya. Pleasure to talk to you.